Hey everybody, Jacob Godar. Today we are talking about how to estimate rock. We just shot a video on how to estimate mulch. This is going to be similar with different aspects, and I want to go over all of that. If you're already doing some mulch installs in your landscape company and now you're wanting to get over here and get into putting landscape rock in, you'd think it's the same thing, right? It's easy. Well, there's some different aspects to it, some things I want you to think about and some things we're going to go over today. Before we get into that though, I want to say we are having the GrowCom training event here in Cape Coral, Florida on October 14th. I'm super excited about that. There's only a few seats left. If that's something you want to do to grow, if you want to grow your company, if you want to know more about marketing, if you want to be around other companies that are expanding, if you want to learn more about sales, culture, all of those things, it's going to be a very, very intimate group of people learning about those things to expand their company and be ready to kill 2023. Now, let's get right into this. First, how this compares to mulch. Very similar. We're going to measure the beds. It's the same thing we talked about before. We're going to keep this easy. We need to know the total square footage of the beds that are getting installed. And so if you don't know, square footage is length times width. Now, with that metric, you're able to really produce all the quantities of things you need, because there's going to be a couple quantities. In mulch, where there's only one quantity, there's going to be two different materials, very specific, technically three materials in this, that are really going to make this job happen. When we're measuring length times width, if you've got a circular bed, just measure straight across both ways, make it a square. If you're worried that you're measuring too much, just shrink that square a little bit. Go for averages. If you've got a flowy bed, just measure like almost the widest spot and make everything into little squares and write them down on your pad. 10 by 10, 5 by 7, 5 by 9, 10 by 12. Add those all together. That's going to give you your cumulative square foot. Now we're going to go with that to the measure of what that goes towards. What does that get used for in a rock job? Now the materials we're going to use rock. Pretty basic because it's a rock job, right? We're going to use landscape fabric. Very important that we talk about landscape fabric, because if you don't know what I'm about to tell you, you will get burnt on jobs. Then there's landscape pins to staple that down. Typically those are going to be like sod staples, used staples, you can get circle staples, jabber, magnetic stick, whatever's clever, man. Whatever you want to do. But those are the materials you're going to use. Rock's going to vary wildly in price. There's going to be a bunch of different options. Some of my advice to you is pick a few that are most common. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't offer 762 different options. Also, rock is heavy. If you don't have the equipment to get it there, think about delivery. Think about what's a delivery cost. Take the delivery price, add tax to it to verify you've got tax to it. Mark up that cost so you make money on every dime that goes through your business, because that's your responsibility as a business owner. And now we can get that delivered, and that's going to save us a lot of heartache if we don't have the stuff. Second, the landscape fabric. What I told you that you needed to know so you don't screw yourself in business. You need to be able to approach every job when you're estimating and be able to tell a homeowner these words. Ma'am or sir, it's my job to tell you the good things as much as it is to tell you the bad things about the project you're wanting me to estimate. So with that, since we're wanting to put rock in, I need to let you know, everybody buys landscape fabric, weed mat, and it's marketed that way as weed mat. That's a sales gimmick. That's to get you, the consumer, to buy that, to make the weeds easier to deal with. When the fact of the matter is, it's not actually weed mat, it's soil separation fabric. It keeps rock up here above the soil from disappearing into your sand or mud or whatever substrate you have. Yes, may it help a little bit, or will it help a little bit with weeds? Yeah, it will help some. But any organic matter or any dust on those rocks is immediately going to cause weeds to germinate still. So just because there's fabric underneath, it's not going to make your beds weed free. Also, landscape fabric can only go so close to an edge. There's a breaking point where old stuff will still germinate. That's all around your landscape beds. It can only go so close to a plant. That's all around your landscape beds. So no, the true measure to not have weeds in your bed is continued maintenance, is continued pre-emergent, even if it's rock, because that's going to help in that bed and help seeds from germinating on the mat, and continued weeding and spraying to keep those beds in control. And the worst thing that you can have happen to a rock bed is for it to get covered in weeds, because it'll stain the rock. The nice thing everybody loves about rock is it's forever. Now you got to haul it all out and redo it, and you're back to that original huge expense. And finally, the one that needs no explanation is the landscape pins. This is going to be something that when you're doing this and you're finding out about material costs, you need to find out about those matting costs, and you need to find out about the rock cost. But even like factor in pins, you should be coming up with a way where I know that like this many square foot's going to take this many pins, so you can just calculate it out on a spreadsheet. Take an area that you landscape fabric, if you don't know yet, and stab what it takes in it to mat it down, and just measure that area and come up with a general amount per square foot of what it's going to take, right? And then that way you can start pricing in the pins as well. You want to price in every little piece. That's something that in our company, we used to always do that. Now I've rolled that into the cost of matting because I just knew the cost of it. And I'm about to do what I just said and break it back out again and have pins as a separate line item, because it's really good to see those different line items and know on your orders what all it is you need. So your purchase orders are always good. You know exactly, you're not going off some note for the team to try to do the job. So we've talked about the materials, we've went over that, we've thought about marking those up and how we do that. Everything we mark it up the exact same way here. Now let's get into the labor portions of this. First, just like a mulch bed, there's bed prep. Even more so if it's rock. And if you're taking out old rock, it's a nightmare. So bed prep, figure out a square footage price for this. You can start eyeballing these at the beginning. We charge like $1 a square foot typically to get out mulch, all the way up to maybe $2.50 to get out rock a square foot. Don't use my numbers and think they're right. Use my numbers to estimate a job and then see how well it went, and then, you know, guide ship, job costing. That's what that is. That's that labor factor. Then there's a labor factor in this job of how long does it take to put in a yard of rock. So if I put in 5 yards of rock, how many hours does it take to put in each? Well, what are the variables? Is it at the very back of the property? Is it the very front of the property? You should have an hour, you should have an amount of time it takes to put each rock in, and then you might add 10 or 20% based on if it's exceptionally harder than normal. The other thing that's technically before that, but we're just talking about all of them so you'll be able to pool them all together, is the time to lay the matting down. I usually always charge 40 cents a square foot just to install the matting. I used to charge 40 and 40. 40 cents for the matting, 40 cents to lay the matting. And that should include pins to be able to blow that out and get that whole thing done really, really quick. You start seeing me say all these square footage things, it's because I want to be able to calculate beds and numbers and totals really, really quick. And that's what we do here in our company. So those are the labor factors to think about that. I talked about some of the material things, even to deliveries. I'll also be thinking about disposals. And now when we put those two together, off of our square foot, we have to know how much material. Rock is typically, 80 to 100 square foot is what a ton or a yard's gonna cover. That's been our experience, but this changes. The bigger the rock. These are all things, I'm telling you all the gold here, and this is all pretty simple, but if you don't know it, it'll fuck you. The bigger the rock, the less coverage. So if you start getting into big 6-inch rock, it might only cover 20 square foot a ton. If you get down into 1-inch rock, it might cover 120 square foot a ton. In Illinois, we do rock estimates on 100 square foot a ton. Here we do rock estimates 120 square foot a yard, and you need to know like that coverage so you can get that right. The key is always overestimate. If you come up with 6.2 yards or tons, whatever that is, it's gonna be different where you're at, how the lingo is. I would always round that up to 6.5. Anytime you say anything over a number we need, like I would always just round it up a half to make sure you've got enough. Having more is always good. It's always safe. It's so much better than not having enough. The only problem with more rock comes in if you don't have the equipment, you're not set up, and you get too much delivered. That becomes a pain. So you might want to meter out your deliveries, put more delivery fees in there so you don't have to scoop a bunch off the ground and try to figure out what to do with that. So we're going to take all those things, we're going to take all our material, we're going to add all those things together, and now we can create our totals. We've got this is how much rock, this is how many square foot's getting prepped. Here's all those labor items we went over. Here's all the markup. Here's our deliveries and disposals. And we're able to put all of that stuff together and package it up as a job. The reason I go over all these things, and I'm not doing a draw out for you because I need you to have the mindset of how to do it. I'm not gonna walk you through every single step. That's what for, if you got a question and you wanna be involved in something like that, that's what for being in GrowComp's for. But I'm gonna give you the mindset of what all is to think about, because too often people say, oh, I put in river rock $175 a yard. And then just take river rock and times it by 175. Do they think about the disposal? Do they think about the deliveries? Do they think about the, oh, oops, delivery, we need more? Do they think about the bed prep? Do they think about all these little factors? You should break it out into a bunch of small pieces so when you put it together, you've allocated for as many things as possible. So that's how we do rock estimates here. If you do something different, leave it in the comments. I want to hear it. I want to see you be able to estimate a rock job. I want to make sure you get enough material. I also want to make sure you make a profit and you earn money because it's your responsibility to make a profit to help your team.